Do you listen to the New York Times podcast? You don't. It's the one you don't. It's the most popular podcast there is, you know.
Is it like a news recap thing, or?
You've never even heard it? You don't know what it is? Do you know they made like $30 million a year?
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it. It's the Daily with the New York Times.
I get all my American news from the late night comedy shows. I don't need any more.
Here is their ad for the latest show, and I've heard things like this before from oil companies supporting their show. But this one really gets me. Listen carefully.
This podcast is supported by ExxonMobil. What if the fuel in your tank could lower your car's emissions up to 85%? ExxonMobil is working to develop low-emission fuels that could one day lower emissions from trucks, cars, even airplanes. Learn more at exxonmobil.com/fuels.
Now, I don't know what to say to that. It makes me angry. It makes me confused. It makes me angry again. What the hell? They're developing fuels. You have nothing to say to that.
Well, have we started the show? Are we? Hello and welcome to episode 111 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, the myths that are holding back renewables. No, they don't involve dragons.
Switzerland is planning to build the tallest building ever made out of wood. I guess they've never heard of a little story called The Three Little Pigs.
All that and so much more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Hello, Brian. How are you this week? They've just announced that I can get my fourth booster today. Have you had your booster yet? Your fourth?
Yeah, I've had a fourth already, so I'm way ahead of you.
Any side effects?
I felt it the most out of the 4 shots.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the most sort of like, tired kind of symptoms. It still wasn't bad, but I felt it the most.
That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, no, there was nothing.
Well, I felt good about it because, I don't know, maybe that means it's, building up in my system. And finally, with the fourth one, I started to feel it. So I took that as a good sign that the vaccine is doing something.
Okay, well, you have that to look forward to. I was at the Drive Electric event here in Regina, which was happening here and many places over the world. It's happening in Saskatoon this weekend as well, where we live. This is an event where people bring out their EVs and show them off to the community and answer questions, sort of EV owner give back to the community to help EV adoption.
Yeah.
This year, the weather was piss poor where we are, so they moved it inside a convention center, an art center. Drove some of the cars inside, and I was thinking, well, maybe I won't go because I don't do public appearances during COVID and indoors. But I looked at the video that somebody had posted, and everybody was wearing masks, so I went down, and immediately I was swarmed. So there's people
You're
there
a local celebrity
who listens to the podcast. In fact, they even mentioned the podcast in their public remarks. Matthew Pointer, who organized the event, one of the people who organized the event, said people were coming up to him and saying that they listened to the show. So I thought I would interview him, and I gave a little clip of Matthew Pointer talking to us at the event. So here it is.
Yeah, and a bunch of people came up, and there was actually several in the crowd who said, yeah, we actually listened to the Clean Energy podcast, and we like it. It's a good glimpse of everything, from cars to solar to...
Did anyone suggest a replacement for Brian?
Not at this time.
He brings down the show. It's clear to you. He's got a cappuccino machine too now, and it still hasn't really perked him up.
Yeah, I think you should crank up the gigawatts on that thing, 1.21 caffeine molecules per inch.
What's your favorite car here?
You know what? I really like the EV6 by Kia.
Yeah.
The Ioniq 5 by Hyundai is also a really popular car.
And what do you drive, a 3?
I have a 3. Yeah, and if I could do it over again, I'd probably consider the Ioniq 5.
Why is that?
Well, the price point is incredible. It's got fast charging. Hatchback on it is nice. Nice fit and finish. The Tesla is great, don't get me wrong. But if I was to get another car, I'd probably look at some other options.
What would you miss most about your Tesla?
Probably the fast charging. Yeah. It's great for road trips. The network is spot on. I've driven my car to San Francisco, in fact, and it's amazing. 7,000 kilometer round trip, $200 for charging.
So what do you think of that? He was kind of interested in the Hyundai.
Yeah, and I went down to the show very briefly too, and I saw, the Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6. I think those were the most exciting ones there. And the EV6 was parked next to Kia, our local dealer, who had a booth there, and they were sponsoring the show. And I asked the guy at the Kia booth, "Oh, can I sit in the Kia?" And he said, "Oh, you got to ask the owner."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, it's not your car?" And it's like, "Oh no, we wish it was ours." So
the exact same thing happened to me. The exact same words were exchanged.
Yeah. So Kia doesn't have any extra sitting around. So whoever owns it brought it down to the show and was nice enough to let people have a look and have a sit. But Kia was jealous that it wasn't theirs.
Yeah, and they said you can actually order them for free without putting a deposit down, and you don't lose anything. Now, let's say I ordered one and one came in a year from now, which is when it would, unfortunately.
Yeah, a year and a half is what they told me.
One of the people at the event who always brings his 2017 Bolt, he was an early adopter of the Bolt. He brought it all the way from Winnipeg.
Wow. Jason
Cruikshank, who's a EV organizer here in Saskatchewan, but he moved to Winnipeg. So that's a 5.5-hour drive normally. He had to charge that because the Bolt doesn't charge very fast. It only charges at 55 kilowatts on a good day. Well, it was +4 and snowy and rainy, and he had to charge an hour 2 times plus 2 10-minute stops, which he did because he was like you. He wanted to stop at all the chargers and check out the network. But he said he was only getting 30 kilowatt charging a lot of the times. So not only is the 55 bad, if it's not good conditions, and I don't think there's any preconditioning available on that model of Bolt, and not even on the new one either, that I know of. I would have thought that highway driving would, the charging and discharging would heat it up. It does in the Leaf because it gets too hot in the Leaf, the modern Leaf.
Yeah.
So
you'd think it would have been, the battery would have been warmed. But it's hard to say sometimes what causes the charging speed. It's always a bit of a mystery how much speed you're going to get.
And it's very depressing, and it's a difficult thing because that's a big commitment. And he bought a hotel for 2 nights here he's got a young child, not too young anymore. And his wife was there showing us the car. And then he said, "Hey, do you want to, people were starting to leave towards the end. And he said, "Do you want to drive it?" And I said, "Okay." So my partner drove it because she's the one who's going to be using it. And we tried our baby car seat in it because she needs one for work to get it in and out. The seats were just terrible, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they talk about the Bolt seats being bad, and this family has augmented it with their own pad, but they are, I've had better seats than go-karts I made as a kid. They're just not good. They're like hard and a little bit of foam, like an inch of loose foam that you might have in a really cheap lawn chair that does virtually nothing. He's tried to reupholster them and do different things. If it was me, I would try, if I had the money, I would probably try sourcing seats from the new car and just swapping them out. I don't even know if you can legally do that, but they should fit.
Yeah, or, Recaro aftermarket seats, something like that.
Can you buy aftermarket seats?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I didn't know that. That's an interesting option.
Recaro is the big brand.
The new model does come with a power seat, and they are much better, but some people still say in the reviews that they're not great, but they're a lot better. So I have to wait to sit in one before we buy that, because I swear I had a bad back after I sat in that car. Anyway, Brian, I drove it and my wife loved it. She loved it, and we used Android Auto with the maps, and that was our first experience with that. That's very cool. This has got a big screen. It's got a 10-inch screen, which is really big, actually, and
That's
nice, and it does the job quite luxuriously. And I tried the one-pedal driving for the first time in my life. Now, if you're new to EVs, one-pedal driving is when the brakes do so much regenerative braking on a setting that they will bring you to a complete stop. Like they'll aggressively
without touching the brake. Yeah.
All hybrids and electric cars have regenerative braking so that the motor goes in reverse and makes electricity to put back in the battery as you're stopping. It uses your kinetic energy and turns it back into electricity. Well, it was my first time using that. How is it on the Tesla Model 3?
Yeah, I love it. It's, there's many days where I don't even touch the brake.
And this doesn't have, some will blend in a friction brake at the end under like 3 miles an hour, 3 kilometers an hour, something like that. This does not, but it still stops you even on hills somehow because the regenerative braking is just that hard. So my daughter, I'm teaching her how to drive. She's only 14, so it's not legally teaching her how to drive, but sometimes we go to a parking lot and play around.
Yeah.
And she says, why can't I use my left foot for the brake? And I said, it's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's not safe because, you could be using both at the same time. Well, this you don't even have to. All you got to do is go, something, a foreign object on the road. I must stop. You take your foot off the gas and it's immediately braking. You use the brakes, the friction brakes, the normal brakes for emergency stopping. So, that's cool. And then I floored it, and the frickin' thing just lost it. I mean, it was flinging dirt and debris all over the place as it just lost traction immediately. And this is a front wheel drive. It has a lot of power. Yeah, and it's not even the most powerful electric car, but yeah.
I had to use the brakes. I did another hard brake today because I had to avoid running over a squirrel. So probably, again, cost me on my Tesla safety score for hard braking.
I'm torn on squirrels, the ethical issue of killing a squirrel or not, because one got into our friend Dean's attic and just drove him crazy and was relentless. And then I watched them on Mark Rober's YouTube channel where he was setting YouTube or squirrel obstacle courses, and they're smart little bastards.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, they're probably smarter than Mark Rober, so I think they're pretty smart. I don't know if I could run over one or not. But on the other hand, I think, well, when I see a dead squirrel on the road, at least that guy's not going to go in somebody's attic and chew on their wiring and burn their house down, because that is possible. So, yeah. And there was lots of room at the back seat, I found. The hatchback storage is minimal. But other than that, it's comfortable. It's nice. You sit high when you drive it. You feel like you're sitting high. The Toyota Prius that we have is very low. It's almost sports car low. And the Leaf is higher than that, but this is higher than the Leaf still. So it's kind of nice high ride. And when you get out, it's nice and smooth, and you don't have to bend your knees and do a squat up.
All right. Well, it sounds like you're inching closer to maybe buying a Bolt.
Well, I guess and no, Brian. I mean, some parts of it think that, Jesus, it's an awfully small car. It's smaller than the Leaf. It's smaller than the Prius. Can we manage with this as a transition vehicle? And then I started looking at some other things, and I don't know. But it's still a long shot. We have to sell the Prius for gobs and gobs of money for us to get one. And then I have to have one. You are counting down the clock to retirement. It's the end of June, and you'll be done.
Yeah, I just have a few more things to do. I should, the next week should cover most of the stuff that I have to do. But I wanted to mention, because people keep asking me, well, what are you going to do when you're retired? And, typically I say nothing, because that's my goal, is to do nothing. Aside from this podcast, that's really the main thing. But I finally thought of something, like what my first retirement project is going to be. Do you want to hear about that?
Sure. You got to pitch it to the crowd here? Okay,
this is big. I'm going to make my own shoelaces.
Did I just hear a tumbleweed? You're going to make your own shoelaces. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the Clean Energy Show. It's been a good run. We want to thank you all for listening. We will not be back next week, as Brian will be making shoelaces. Why? Who makes shoelaces? Why?
I'm constantly annoyed by shoelaces. Like, you buy a pair of shoes, the shoelaces wear out, you have to buy new shoelaces.
This is a terrible start to your retirement, making shoelaces. That's what I could see you ending up as maybe in 30 years, with hair down to your feet and fingernails, 5 feet long.
Well, once you try my shoelaces, you'll be convinced. But no, I'm constantly annoyed by shoelaces. Like, they wear out in your shoes, you go buy some new ones. And the first problem is you can never find the damn ones that you want. Like, they're always the wrong size or the wrong shape or they're wrong color or whatever. And then once we started internet shopping, I thought, oh, this is the answer to all my problems, buying shoelaces on the internet. But no, I don't know. It's still a problem. But years ago, there was this TV show called Going Deep with David Rees. I'm a big fan of David Rees. He's got a podcast called Election Profit Makers. And this TV show was amazing, where it would be like, each episode would be something simple, like how to sharpen a pencil. Like, that's an episode.
Yeah.
And how to make an ice cube. things like that. And one episode was how to tie your shoes. So
Really?
I learned, this was a few years ago, I learned all this stuff about shoelaces. And I thought, I'm going to get more into shoelaces, but I never had time because I was employed. So now I'm going to get into it. So the first thing is Paracord makes the best shoelaces, which is like cord that they use for tying parachutes. Like it's really strong. And you can buy a few Paracord shoelaces, but they don't come in enough like sizes and shapes and stuff. So I figured out you can buy those little like aglet things. You can buy metal aglet things and just a bunch of Paracord.
Where do you buy
and you can
the
make your
aglet
own
things?
shoelaces, whatever length you want.
Where do you buy the aglet things? I could use some of those.
Amazon. Yeah, I just found them on Amazon. I don't think they were there a few years ago, but now you can. You can buy the aglets and the cord in different lengths and colors. You just crimp them like they're metal, and you just put them on and you crimp them with pliers. I haven't tried it yet, but
I've got to get me some of those. This is
you're
consumer
gonna
advice you did not
you
expect to get.
You making fun of these shoelaces. You're
Now
going to be
I'm
begging
them.
me. You're going to be begging me
I'll put
for
in
a pair
my
of
order
these shoelaces.
tomorrow. I'll give you my what is it? My eyelet count or something, and you can do that. That's you'll keep us up to date.
Yeah, I'll give you some updates.
And listeners, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com if you are concerned about Brian or if you are interested in placing an order. I have a story for you, Brian. It was Easter holiday for my wife because she works at the same hours as the Board of Education as a social worker. So when the school kids are off, she's off. And so she thought she would do some long needed tidying up of our laundry room because we live in a house without a basement and without a garage. So our laundry room is our catch-all for junk.
Yeah.
And it gets bad
Us
sometimes.
too. I'm going to be working on that as well.
She went in there and was cleaning away and organizing things and hauling things out. We have this washing machine with a pedestal, and the pedestal has a washing machine in it. Don't ask me why I bought that. It was on sale at Costco when I was ordering my washing machine, and it was only like $300, and now they're selling for $840. So I guess it was a good buy. So you could do a small item in this little washing machine below your washing machine, say some whites or shoelaces. While you're doing your main load, or I don't know. Anyway, a couple of years ago, it shot water all over the laundry room, and I didn't install it. The movers did from Costco, and they're not very bright. I've talked about movers before; they're just out of jail, and they didn't put a clamp on that I saw on the YouTube video from the manufacturer, and it shot. That's not my story. My story is when we were in there fixing that. We saw a hole in the wall. My wife said, there's a hole in the wall. There's a 1-inch hole in the wall. And I can see daylight. And I said, hogwash. That's not possible. We live in a climate that gets down to minus 42 sometimes. How would we not know there was a 1-inch hole in our climate house?
And your climate walls are super darn thick. So that would have to be a very deep, long hole.
They're double 2x4 construction offset to prevent thermal bridging. Look it up. And then there's like 2 or 3 inches of styrofoam on top of that, rigid hard, so it's a thick wall. And then there's 2 layers of siding on the outside. And there it was. There was daylight and a draft. It was from when they installed the solar panels and the car charger in the front driveway. The electrician drilled. Now, keep in mind, my mother died, and I wasn't too upset about this, if you're wondering, because she was very old and we didn't get along very well. But my mother happened to die right when that was happening. And I don't know if the guy mentioned it to me, but I don't, I knew that he drilled a hole that didn't work and it had to come up from somewhere else. I just assumed he would fill it.
It was the fog of war.
It was the fog of war, the fog of holes. It's covered on the front of the house by the thick cable coming up from the ground where the cable goes up to an external outlet for 240-volt driveway EV charging.
Yeah, so the cable goes in front of the hole, so you just can't see.
More or less. You can see that there's a hole there because there's a cut hole in the siding, but you can't see that there's a hole there that goes right inside the house. But there it was for 4 years because we just celebrated our solar anniversary on the weekend, 4 years. So it's been there for 4 years. And I kept thinking, when the fan runs in the house, when the DC fan runs in the furnace, it's colder than it used to be. And now I know why. 4 years of a 1-inch hole in a very cold climate. And now I'm wondering, like, does the radon readings that I took with your radon detector even work? Like, do I need to go look at that again because there was fresh air?
Yeah, because you're getting tons of fresh air from that.
So it's incredible. It's just incredible. So I went out and I bought the most expensive foam expanding filler stuff that was anti-pest in case a mouse decided to chew on it and come right in. And so I bought that and filled it up, and now it's more insulated than it was before, that 1 inch.
Well, they always say, like, when you're insulating your house, like, one of the problem areas is like the doors. So if you've got a little crack at the bottom of your door, like just a couple of millimeters, they say that that's kind of equivalent to having like a 1 inch hole in your house.
Really?
But you had a 1 inch hole in your house.
Yeah, and it ain't good. Let me tell you, people, it ain't good. It ain't good at all. I'm so happy that's taken care of, and I'm going to move on though, Brian, because Corvette is making. There's going to be an electric Corvette, and I'll tell you why I'm happy about that. It's because I hate Corvettes. Why do I hate Corvettes? I'm not a car person per se. People think I'm a car person because I'm all about EVs.
Yeah.
I'm about EVs because I think they're cool. I always expected them to be cool since I was a kid, but I'm not really a car person. I kind of liked Corvettes around 1985, 1986 when they came out with kind of a new styling, and thought, oh, I saw one that was cool. I wouldn't mind having. I'm probably going to get one when I get rich. Yeah, that'll work out.
Yeah.
But now my neighbor bought one of those very cars when he was having a midlife crisis in 1985.
Like a classic one.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not a 1985 one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was new to him then. So, he had put all of his money into it. And it's just, I swear, Brian, when he washes it, I have to look away and cover the kid's eyes because the man is like having some sort of sexual interaction with his car. He just loves his freaking cars, and he washes them every 3 days, literally every 3 days, inside and out, detailing them in nice summer. The hotter, the better. He waits to the peak heat of the day, and it's. I think some laws in Utah are being broken. That's all I'm going to say about that. But the damn thing is noisy. Now, getting back to my house has rigid foam insulation, so it's not soundproof. Not very good soundproofing. The sound goes right through the rigid foam. And his drive is adjacent to my house, like right adjacent. So he wakes up the kids every morning at 7:30 before the pandemic, starting his Corvette during, say, May, June, July, August, and October.
It's that loud, like just pulling it out of the driveway?
No, just starting it. It's very low and rumbly. And, people like the noise, but I mean, just starting it, you start an electric Corvette, and my kids would hear nothing. So, I don't know.
But it's coming.
When we're bought out
Corvette
by Elon Musk, when the show is bought out for $500 million from Elon Musk, I'll buy him an electric just so that it's quiet. Electric Corvette. He probably won't like it, but I'll buy him some rags so he can wash it. And another weird thing that happened to me yesterday is I drove my daughters home from school, and I was thinking, my tires are really noisy. I wonder if they expanded in pressure. Because I uncharacteristically filled them to the right tire pressure during cold weather in the winter.
Yeah.
And I never do that because it's cold.
It's too cold. It's a pain in the ass to do when it's cold.
Yeah, and you got to get down in the snow, and it's, your fingers, you got to not have gloves on. So it's not something I do. But I lost air in one of my tires because my tires were new and they were put on earlier in the winter, and one of them ended up losing air and causing my thing to go off, so I had to fill it. And so I filled it to the proper temperature, the proper pressure, and they were 10 pounds over that now. And it was only +5 or something yesterday Celsius.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was like -17 when I did it, but that was 10. And that's a really good thing I looked, because that, it's not safe, and they could have blown, they could have been pushed to the max. I was probably getting my best fuel economy that ever got in a Leaf due to the high tire pressure, unfortunately. But also the road noise was unbearable.
Yeah. Years ago, I had an AMC Gremlin. I know, very cool. And I was filling up air in the tires one day, and I was really lucky it didn't explode. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I I screwed it up. Like I was trying to fill it to like twice as much as it should have.
Why?
And I can't remember the circumstances, but I realized it and I was like, oh crap, this could have exploded. And I let a bunch of air out and it was fine. But
so that's how I spent my afternoon, was letting air out from every tire. And but now, I mean, it's only plus 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees. I mean, it's going to get up to, summer temperatures soon. Am I going to have to do it again? Is this an ongoing thing? And if so, then I want solid tires. I want airless tires to come into being.
Well, you keep hearing about that. Every couple of years, you'll hear a story about airless tires are coming, and so far they're not.
Another thing is I've been shopping for EVs, and the Quebec dealership of one of the Chevrolet dealerships in one of the suburbs of Montreal had Bolts for $29,000 instead of like $39,000. And I thought, did they get a new batch in? Are they a new lower price? Well, no, they took off the $10,000 and didn't tell you. They took off the rebates and didn't tell you.
Yeah. Which you don't qualify for because you don't live in Quebec.
Yes. They said, here in Quebec, we have generous rebates. So they knew I wasn't from Quebec because I did an Auto Trader inquiry. But I'm finding that in shopping for EVs, I don't know what the price is, because is it taken off? They don't say so. They almost never say so. And that's really frustrating because it's making it difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
Because there's nuances in some of the vehicles will have small packages that add up to a few $100s or a couple $1,000s, and you don't know exactly what has been on this particular vehicle that may make it more expensive. So it's getting really hard to tell, and that's they shouldn't be allowed to do that,
Yeah.
I had the option. I was pricing out a vehicle today, and you have to click. I hate that you always have to click to add taxes. Who doesn't pay taxes? Do some people not pay taxes on cars like GST and PST?
No. Everyone pays taxes.
Yeah, and then that you think, I can afford that, and all of a sudden your monthly payment's $150 more a month because of taxes and destination fees and something like that. So, and also this week I was watching PBS Frontline. They have a 2-part series on big oil's influence, and I learned that in 1993, Al Gore, as the vice president, he wanted to introduce a carbon tax way back then. Now, I started hearing about carbon taxes way back then, but I didn't know he was on the verge of getting it passed. And then big oil lobbied one senator and got him to change his mind very easily. In fact, they were so impressed at how easy it was, they kept lobbying, and now we have the world we live in today. And so, it's all about emphasizing doubts in climate science. And the episode was not brought to you by the David H. Koch Foundation, I guarantee you. It was like other CBS program or PBS programs are. The Koch brothers were a target of this. And one final thing, Brian, that I want to talk about this week, if I may, is that we are changing the podcast to AAC MPEG 4 files instead of MPEG 3. Now,
Breaking news.
I've done some testing on this last week and countless research over the last couple of weeks. And AAC, this is a file format that is twice as good as MPEG 3 for the same size. So you could have half the file size and same quality, or you could have the same file size and basically twice the quality, which some people may or may not notice overly. But the point is, it's a superior file size that's been around, but not everyone supports it. Deezer and Pandora don't support it. I know Deezer will take our podcast off their listings. Deezer is like a Spotify that no one uses, but they're trying to get market share. I'm not sure about TuneIn. If you guys are on any of these platforms and are successfully listening to this show, then please fire us an email and let us know. I'm switching. I'm saying, Lipson, our host, says don't do that because you want max. I'm saying screw it. If we lose 1% of our people, I want that damn file size, quality, and the hell with you. I'm the hell with the world. It's 2022. They've been pushing for this for my whole podcast career of almost 20 years, and nobody's. Come on, people.
Yeah, MP3 was created decades ago. It's not that good, but it's the standard for whatever reason.
I'm finding, Brian, that sound is actually more complicated than anything else, that there's more nuances and problems and subtleties to sound than there is to picture.
Well, I tell this to my film students because, you can take a modern digital camera and take a pretty good picture or video of any kind of scene out there in the world. But to capture that same scene audio-wise, it usually takes 50 tracks of sound to do that. Like, you can't just point a microphone somewhere and automatically get good sound. It's a much more complicated thing.
I just wanted to update a few of our stories here that we've talked about before. The first one is that I was talking last week about radiant heat and how much I love that idea. It is available in the BZ4X Toyota EV.
Yeah, and this is where there's an extra sort of heating panel by your legs. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. It's just under the glove box, and it radiates downward onto your legs to ostensibly make you use less cabin heatings, which would save a lot of energy in an EV and give you more range. It was first introduced in the BMW iX, I learned, so Toyota is not the first people to use it. And I was watching another review show on YouTube, and they were saying that everybody is calling the BZ4X Buzzforks for short. So
yeah, because Toyota has a terrible naming tradition for their cars. So yeah, BZ4X, that translates to Buzzforks. Sure, I'll go for that.
We did talk about a giant solar and wind farm being built in Morocco to supply the UK with clean energy via subsea cables. Power cables under the ocean. The twin 1.8 gigawatt high voltage direct current subsea cables will be the world's longest, and I have an update to that. The subsea cable manufacturer XLCC is going to build a factory in Scotland to supply four 2,361 mile long or 3,800 kilometer cables. That's a long cable. I've got some long extension cords, Brian, but that's a doozy.
That's a really long cable.
I'm trying to think of between what 2 points in North America is that? That's like from here to San Francisco, considering that our friend there went 7,000 kilometers. That's a long, continuous cable. Like, it has to be continuous. They have to put it underneath. There's not a junction box.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, what if a squirrel chews through it? What do they do then?
That's why you should always run over squirrels, or at least not feel sad about them. Yeah, or especially those scuba diving squirrels. So the first phase will be open between 2025 and 2027. And that is, of course, the idea that places that have more clean energy, such as sunshine, you can build a giant solar farm there and pump it. This has been talked about, maybe going from Arizona to Canada and things like that, or just going back and forth, just because people have intermittent sun in some places and wind in others, and having those lines connect everything makes it work better.
So I've got a follow-up too to a story we talked about last week, and this is the province of Quebec here in Canada. They have banned new hydrocarbon exploration, and they ended up giving a big payout to oil companies who already had leases or plans to develop oil wells and so forth. They paid out $100 million to shut down new oil production in Quebec. This is a very big deal, and I was kind of surprised how much of a non-story it was. Like if something like that happened around here, there'd be chaos and mayhem, and they'd be storming the legislative building.
They would literally be storming buildings and taking to the streets. So
I was watching Markham Hislop's YouTube channel, Energi Media, and he had an interview on there with Hugo Seguin, who's from the Montreal Centre for International Studies. And they were just talking about this, and I thought it was worth bringing up because his take on it was that it is literally a part of the culture, we often talk about how we're here in the middle of oil country, which we absolutely are. The province of Saskatchewan and Alberta, this is the heart of oil country in Canada. And it permeates everybody's sensibilities here. And people have a real pride around oil and gas. And, this is our heritage, for better or for worse. And of course, a lot of people have made their living on it over the years. So much money has been made in oil and gas. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that people have a pride in it. The emotional attachment I don't quite understand because, everyone knows these things pollute and cause pollution, and that's bad. But anyway, in Quebec, it's kind of the opposite. They, their pride revolves around their hydroelectric power. So, Hydro-Quebec is their utility there, and it's just a very clean electricity grid there where most of it comes from hydroelectric power. And this is something that all Quebecers kind of know about and take pride in. So it's just a totally different culture and kind of the opposite of what we have here. So I thought that was, well worth kind of talking about and mentioning.
I like it how Markham Hislop, who has a podcast and is mostly on YouTube and is an energy journalist in Western Canada and located in British Columbia, he sometimes gets to the culture of these things because he's been reporting on it. And, I think he was raised in Saskatchewan and worked in Alberta and has been through oil country in Canada and knows these things. It is interesting to see that. And I do have a story on Quebec Hydro coming up later in the lightning round, which will be at the end of the show.
And the other thing I'll mention too, which we've said on the show, is that Hydro-Quebec, the electric utility, has a bunch of patents to do with lithium-ion batteries. They were one of the inventors, basically, of modern lithium-ion batteries. So I don't know if the average Quebecer knows that, but again, it's part of the culture there somehow.
Alberta in Western Canada has wanted to build an Energi East pipeline through there to the, tidewater at the east side of the country, and Quebec said, not in our property, no.
And I can't remember if I've told this story on the podcast before, but I met a guy one time whose dad was a professor in Quebec, oddly enough. And this guy's dad was the one who basically invented the process for getting oil out of the oil sands. Wow. This was back in the 70s. He was doing research into oil production, and it was often thought that oil sands production was just impractical because it was just too difficult and too expensive. And this guy's dad basically invented this procedure in the 1970s for how to get oil sands oil out of the ground and use it. But the conclusion at the time was, okay, well, this is how you do it, but it'll never be practical because it's just too damn expensive. It just takes too much energy to do it. But of course, the price of oil was much lower back then. So, it's only once the price of oil went to a certain level that, this is now practical, I guess. So let's do it.
Yeah. And, it used to be $80 a barrel before you can make a profit on oil sands, but now it's getting lower and lower. In fact, it might even be $40, which is not good news for the planet, Brian, if that happens. And the oil's going to be up for a while. In fact, the Royal Bank of Canada today was had a press release out saying that oil, gas consumption is going to be very high for a long time thanks to the war, but I think they're kind of biased and they should shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Because I don't like them. They denied me my first mortgage. I'll never forget that. But at the same time, when we were in university, they used to let us take out $5 in bank machines. So if you had an account balance less than 20, you could still access some. So that was nice.
Yeah. No, I had one of those early Royal Bank bank machine cards. It was a sweet deal.
Early days of bank machining, people. We are very old.
And by the way, here in the province of Saskatchewan, we were pioneers in bank machines. We had the first automated tellers through one of our financial co-ops here.
Yeah. It's funny how that happens. We invent a lot of things here, and then we're still kind of a hillbilly part of the world.
Including passive solar houses, of which yours is based on the design for one of the very first passive solar houses.
That house that was a test house, they initiated the first heat exchange recovery ventilator because, so our tiny little province with people who love oil have done some great things in the past when they can, and we're not doing it now, and it kills me, Brian. It kills me.
There was a fellow passed away here recently in Saskatchewan, David Surgic, and he was a real pioneer in geothermal energy. And I think, talked about it before. My university was exploring geothermal heating back in the 70s, and this guy, David Surgic, was one of the leads on that project. And again, very innovative. He passed away recently at the age of 92. So, sorry to hear that. But
the innovators are long gone around here, aren't they? They've all moved on. All right, I've got 3 myths holding back renewables that the Yale School of the Environment published recently. They're involved in the publishing of it, and I thought, that's kind of interesting. So let's see how they sum it up. And the first myth is that grid reliability is a problem. This is something I hear a lot, don't you? I mean, I hear that all the time. The grid can't take this or that. But the System Average Interruption Duration Index, which is complicated. I'll give you that. It's SAID. It's something that the grid people talk about, SAIDI. And this is a metric on how good your grid is. So let's just look at it that way. Germany, where renewables supply nearly half of the country's electricity, has one of the best measurements of grid reliability in the world. In 2020, the SAIDI was just 0.25 hours. And if you compare it to other places, only Liechtenstein and Finland and Switzerland did better in Europe. And you know what was terrible? United States.
Oh, yeah?
So places that also like France was 0.35, so it was significantly worse. It was 50% worse where they have nuclear, and you think nuclear is reliable, nuclear is steady, you can count on nuclear. Well, the place that has nuclear is worse off than the place with renewables. That is 50%.
And of course, this could be not necessarily to do with the plants themselves, but everyone's got infrastructure, and so
there's different things involved. Yes, but those nuclear plants we've talked about recently are down. Half of them are down, in fact, right now. I'm going to talk some more about that later. But Sweden was bad too, and they are relying on nuclear. They're really bad, actually. Sweden. As for their outages there.
And I'll say, too, out at my lake here nearby, they've had the worst of the spring blizzards. It's been ridiculous. We didn't do so bad here, but the power was out in my cottage area. I wasn't there, but over 24 hours. So if I ever do build a new cottage, I think battery backups are going to be essential.
Because you are talking about solar, right? If you have solar, well, maybe by the time you get around to doing this, after your Shoelace project is done, you could get a battery.
Solar and batteries. But it's people were freezing there. No electricity.
Yeah, and you know what else I heard about? There's some people who said they ran out of gas for the fuel for their generators. So, I mean, if that's
because they were running so long.
Yeah. That's something that doesn't happen if you have a natural gas supply and you can run your furnace with electric off a battery. The United States, where renewable energy and nuclear power each provide 20% each, had 5 times Germany's outage rate. And keep in mind that Germany is at 50%. That's just it's a myth, and that the current situation proves it. Myth number 2 is that countries like Germany with lots of renewables must continue to rely on fossil fuels to stabilize the grid and back up variable wind and solar. So as the percentage of electricity generated by renewables in Germany steadily grew, its grid reliability improved with those renewables. So the reliability, you can watch it go up as they've added renewables. And its coal burning and greenhouse gas emissions have substantially decreased. And in Japan, following the reactor meltdowns, more than 40 reactors closed permanently or indefinitely without raising fossil fuel generation or greenhouse gas emissions because they did a lot of things for electricity savings to address that, and renewable energy offset virtually the whole loss of nuclear reactors that were shut down. Didn't know that, wasn't aware of that, so that's interesting, and it's a good case study for that argument. Because solar wind, this is myth 3, because solar wind and wind energy can be generated only when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, they cannot be the basis of a grid that has to provide 24/7 electricity year-round. Well, while variable output is a challenge, it is neither new nor essentially hard to manage. No kind of power plant runs 24/7, not even nuclear, 365 days a year. It's something I've been learning a lot about lately, hearing a lot of stories about that. And operating the grid always involves managing variability and demand time. So seasonal variations in water availability are another thing with hydro, even, that you have less water in certain seasons. So you have to deal with that. Drought reduces electricity output from hydroelectric dams, and nuclear power plants have to be shut down for refueling or maintenance. And big fossil fuel and nuclear plants are typically out of action roughly 7 to 12% of the time, sometimes much more. And a coal plant's fuel supply can be interrupted by a derailment of a train. Well, I don't care about coal because coal's not in the picture. We're not going to talk about coal because we can't do coal, but if people talk about nuclear as an option. Every French nuclear plant was on average shut down for 96.2 days in 2019 due to planned or forced unavailability, and that rose to 115 days in 2020 when they only generated 65% of the electricity that they were theoretically could have produced. I don't know. That's incredible to me. So most of the discussions of renewables on batteries and other electric storage technologies to mitigate variability will use this sort of technology, and there's a lot of them. This is not surprising because batteries are rapidly becoming cheaper. We all know that, 18-20% a year, maybe not this year, but it will continue and widely deployed. And at the same time, new storage technologies with diverse attributes continue to emerge. There's 30 different kinds of battery storage that the U.S. Energy storage database lists. I looked at them. There's lots of different chemical batteries, but there's also, some of the weirder ones like that tower you talked about on a previous podcast that will lift weights and then lower them. Mm-hmm. Basically build a building and out of blocks and then
unbuild it again to capture the energy from the bricks going down. Yep.
Yeah. But, people are just, these myths are baked in. They read them once on Facebook and you can't argue with the person because they believe it. But, do your research, people. And I don't mean on the bad places.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, like things are definitely changing even from when we started this podcast 2 years ago. Minds are starting to get changed, but it is a super slow process. I want to skip ahead since we're talking about grids and grid power. So, do you know what the electric utility in Finland is called?
No.
It's called Fingrid.
That's a good, fun grid name. Fingrid.
A lovely, appropriate name. So, this is a report from a website called Renewables Now, and the Finnish transmission operator, Fingrid, they've started to limit the power going back and forth between Russia. So there's sort of two parts to the story. One is we've been talking a lot about energy and Russia because no one wants to buy their energy from Russia. But I didn't realize that there were necessarily grid connections at play. And there is. So in Finland, they trade electricity on the grid back and forth between Russia. And they're starting to change some of the limits and stuff. So they're not cutting off Russia, but they are trying to limit the amount. And it's, I assume partly political, but also partly practical. You don't want to rely too much on grid power from a country where there's a war going on and there could be disruptions. But this article also mentions their nuclear capability in Finland, and they had a nuclear power plant come online recently. And it is, we often talk about how long this takes to happen. And it was like, a project from a couple of decades ago is finally coming online now.
Wow.
Wow. I'm not sure all the machinations of why it was delayed, if it was just technical or other reasons. But yeah, so amidst all of this, they've got another nuclear power plant coming online in Finland as they adjust, how the power flows back and forth between them and Russia.
Yeah. Well, we got to keep going, Brian, because we're way over scheduled here. Canada, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is now offering a $5,000 rebate on more vehicles for EVs than it used to. Okay. They want to get the pickup trucks and SUVs involved in that. But what was sort of lost in that somebody on Twitter pointed out, was that you can now have the full rebate for plug-in electric hybrids over 50 kilometers. I think it's 50 kilometers of range, not on the battery size, but on how far it gets you. So, efficient vehicles will be rewarded. And because I'm shopping for a vehicle, I went through them all, and I was excited for a while, and then I realized, no, they've included the thing already, and I can't afford that. Suddenly I saw myself in a giant SUV. So with some towing capacity, I'll get to that in a second. So the Lexus NX 450h Plus is $70,000. Okay, not James's price range, 58 kilometers of range. That's pretty decent. I would I'd like to see these things have 60 kilometers of range, especially outside of, anywhere, actually, because you're either, if you're not cold, you're hot, you need air conditioning, and that uses up a lot of your bit of your range too. The Volvo V60 recharged extended range is $60,000, and that gives 87 kilometers of range, which is probably what my Leaf gives me now, my full electric vehicle from the first generation that's with a battery degraded. The Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivan is $50,000, and it's $51,000. Not bad for a big vehicle. Ford Escape plug-in hybrids are 60 kilometers of range, and I thought that's pretty good. And they're the price isn't bad. It's $47,700 before rebate.
We're getting closer and closer to James' price range.
Well, in the right direction, but not close, I wouldn't say. That's 3,300 pounds towing capacity, which isn't great, but it's kind of interesting. Then we have a towing winner, Brian. This is the Dream EV that could cover all of James's problems, all of James's transportation needs, towing, traveling long distances, and city driving. Everything a James needs. It's the Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid. It's 51 kilometers of range, which is better than some of the other ones, which like the Prius Prime was 40, which is pretty useless. It's not great, but it's $45,000, and it's all-wheel drive as standard. Let's see here. It's not as powerful, though, as the RAV4 Prime, but it's got a whopping 4,400 pound towing capacity, which is really good for something like this, and would do me just fine because my SUV is 4,500 boat towing capacity. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you like to tow a trailer, so there you go.
Yeah, like I said last week, though, it's tense thing to do. But the Hyundai Tucson plug-in electric EV, PHEV, is 53 kilometers of range. It's $46,000. It's only available in the luxury trim. The Santa Fe PHEV is 48 kilometers and $44,000. I guess that's about the cheapest one. And the RAV4 Prime, which you cannot buy anywhere in the freaking world because they cannot make them, is $45,000. And it has 68 kilometers of range, which is really good. That's kind of like the Honda Clarity plug-in electric hybrid, or the later Volt with a V scenario. So that's really good. It's only got 2,500 pounds towing capacity. The RAV4s are not good for towing, but it's also the second fastest Toyota there is. So that's a great vehicle. Just can't buy it.
Yeah, and you probably don't really want a plug-in hybrid. You want a full EV, but hey, these are some options.
This is the Clean Energy Show.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about timber frame building. So this is a recent trend in building. We talk often about the carbon footprint of building buildings, and for like concrete, cement is quite carbon intensive, can create a lot of CO2 emissions. So people are starting to figure out how to build again with wood, with timbers. So in Switzerland, they're going to build what is now going to be the new largest timber frame building, and it's going to be about 20 stories tall. The previous tallest timber building is in Norway, and it's 18 stories tall. So apparently you can, with a timber core made of wood, replace what would normally be a concrete core for these, surprisingly tall buildings, like 20-story building made out of wood. I think I love all of these new developments in wood. It's amazing.
It is true. Like I have seen some stories on that. I think they're building like a 10-story building in Vancouver, or somewhere in British Columbia, Canada. The idea is that wood is renewable, and that the carbon that it takes to grow it is consumed as it grows. And when you get rid of it, it doesn't last forever, but can last 100 to 150 years or something like that, usually. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wonder about some of these houses that are made of wood, how long they're going to last where we live. But
well, yeah, it's true. Like all of our homes basically in North America are all wood frame construction, and they always feel kind of temporary because of that. Like my house is now 50-some years old, and it's starting to show its age. So something like rammed earth is my favorite material for building houses, but I don't know. It's a great development because you wouldn't expect it for something like a high rise.
Okay. Well, just a quick bit of feedback this week. Dawn on Twitter said, good episode. I might actually be able to fill my e-bike for 50 cents at Toronto's cheapest electricity rates, last from 1900 hours to 7 a.m. I was saying 50 cents to charge a car with low overnight rates that are getting proposed in Ontario you could charge your car for 50 cents. You can't even fill a bike for that. I actually meant like put air in your tires. But he's talking about e-bikes. Okay, let's get to the lightning round. Oh, Nelly, it's a good thing we're in new compression format because we've gone way long this week. I apologize. Here, from Electric, Tesla stock has tumbled as much as 10% this morning. This is Tuesday. We're recording this amid a broader market setback. Tesla seems to be particularly affected after India shut down the idea of Tesla importing cars from Giga Shanghai, which is too bad, and questions about Elon Musk buying Twitter. Your thoughts as a major Tesla shareholder?
Yeah, well, I think Tesla would probably want to have a factory in India anyway, and that's probably part of their long-term goals. But, you know, in the interim, they don't appear to want imports from China. So, you know, they really want a factory in every major market. So, you know, I think they will probably get around to that eventually in India. So, I don't know. We'll see.
Ford has officially, this very day, started the actual production of the Ford F-150 electric Lightning pickup truck, saying that today we celebrate the Model T moment for the 21st century. And Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, also said this about the truck's capability.
You can even charge other EVs for your friends that own Teslas.
Very funny, sir. Very funny. Speaking of Tesla, Tesla is already using cobalt-free LFP batteries in half of its new cars. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear it was half. Of course, they've been shifting away from nickel batteries to iron batteries, which is the LFP, which also don't have cobalt because they're a lower cost battery. It's easier to get iron than it is to get nickel. But yeah, to hear that they're already up to half using the non-nickel batteries is quite surprising.
Okay, a good news moment. The Biden administration is set to beat its 25 gigawatt goal of onshore wind by 2025. They're going to beat that goal. So that's good, but nobody knows about it because nobody cares about so-called windmills that affect people. Consumer Reports, you know, the former president is still going on about windmills.
Windmills, yes. They're wind turbines. It's James's pet peeve.
Yes, and toilets not flushing. My toilet flushes just fine, and I eat a lot of cheese. Consumer Reports says U.S. fuel taxes account for 29%, only 29% of state highway funds. So the fuel tax that is supposed to go to roads, to fix roads that you pay at the gas pump, only 29% of it goes to roads. So where does the funding come from when more and more drivers switch to electric vehicles, everyone wonders? Well, the other 71% of that money comes from the general revenues, which everyone pays, including EV owners. One of those stupid things that people think is a problem. That really, if you knew the ins and outs about it, it's not. State regulators approved a $4.5 billion transmission line that would deliver plentiful Quebec hydropower from Canada to New York City. Apparently, Quebec Hydro has hydro to spare, Brian.
Yeah, that's great news. More of this cross-border
but
cooperation.
Were they just sitting on that extra hydro that it was just waiting to go there? I mean, and what's up with that?
It's hydro. They literally just have to turn on a tap.
So a Stanford University paper says that a full transition to wind, water, and solar in 2050 would reduce energy needs by 57%. Energy costs would be reduced by 63%. We're talking about how, it's going to cost us so much money to go to clean energy. When it's all done, 63% less money on your power bill or anything else. And if you include the savings of energy plus the savings to health, it's 86% reduction. And this is the thing that your normal person on the street at the donut shop doesn't get, and you and I do, and everyone who listens to the show.
Clean energy is cheap energy.
And it has a lot of benefits, and we should be doing it anyway. We should be doing it anyway. Finally this week, Joe Biden has launched a $6 billion fund to save the United States nuclear reactors from falling into disrepair. France, however, is spending $50 billion to do the same. None of these French reactors would even pass regulatory approval if built today, according to The Guardian. Anyway, that is I'd say that's our time, but that's more than our time for this week, Brian. We'd like to hear from you. Contact us at the Clean Energy Show. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com on email. TikTok, Clean Energy Pod. And for now, on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod, until, Elon deletes us, if we are ever critical of him. You won't be, but I might be. And if you're new to the show, don't forget to subscribe, or as the kids call it today, follow our podcast to get more shows delivered each week to you when we release them. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to everyone next week.
See you next week.